High heels are often associated with the modern runway or a specific standard of feminine elegance, but 1,000 years ago, they were engineered as rugged military hardware designed for the chaos of the battlefield. In the 10th century Persian Empire, the cavalry was the backbone of the military. To be effective, these riders needed a way to stay anchored to their horses while moving at high speeds. This manuscript illustrates the solution. Look at the archer on the brown horse. His boot features an early heel. This notch locked firmly into the stirrup, giving the soldier the stability required to stand up and accurately fire a bow while galloping. By the 10th century, the heel served as the primary physical interface between a soldier and his horse. It was a functional tool that ensured a rider remained mounted while delivering fire from above. At the end of the 17th century, the Persian Shah sent delegations of soldiers to Russia, Germany, and Spain to build diplomatic ties. This arrival of Persian culture sparked a fashion trend across Europe known as Persia mania. European aristocrats quickly adopted the heeled riding boot. Even those who never intended to see combat wore them to project an image of virility, borrowing the aesthetic of the Persian cavalry to signal their own status as powerful men. King Louis XIV of France became the most aggressive proponent of the heel. Under his rule, the shoe was used to visually define the entire French political hierarchy. These surviving shoes show how Louis used color to send a message. The height proved the wearer was wealthy enough to stay above the mud of the streets, while the bright red dye symbolized the king's power to crush his enemies underfoot. In 1670, Louis passed an edict restricting the red heel exclusively to his favored nobility. At court, the color of a man's shoes provided a map of his rank and his standing with the king. In just one century, the high heel migrated from the stirrup to the throne room. It became a visible metric of hierarchy. A man's social stature was built into his shoes. This balance shifted in the 1730s, as European culture began to strictly categorize fashion into rigid male and female aesthetics. This painting from 1730 shows that divide in action. The woman's shoes have become narrow and ornamental with a high heel, while the men have transitioned to footwear that is noticeably broader, sturdier, and flat. As the high heel became a staple of women's fashion, men increasingly viewed the style as a sign of feminization. Aristocratic men universally abandoned the heel to ensure their overall appearance remained distinct from the emerging female silhouette. But the heel didn't disappear from the male wardrobe entirely. It retreated into utilitarian subcultures, where its original military function was still required. The modern cowboy boot is a direct descendant of that 10th century Persian cavalry heel. The angled Cuban heel allows a rider to lock into a stirrup, proving that the original functional necessity never actually left the Western world. The male heel didn't vanish due to a lack of utility. Instead, it was pushed out of common use as men consciously rejected the style to differentiate themselves from the narrowing and ornamental trends of women's footwear. The heel returned to the mainstream in the 1960s when the Beatles popularized the Beatle boot. By adding a Cuban heel to their public image, they reintroduced the idea of elevated footwear to millions of young men. This sparked a larger movement in the 1970s. Rock icons began using extreme footwear to challenge the gendered fashion rules that had been established back in the 18th century. David Bowie adopted stilettos and platforms to help inhabit his androgynous alter egos. These shoes helped him feel superhuman at a time when gender fluidity was still a strict cultural taboo. In the 1980s, even the most aggressive heavy metal bands like Motley Crue embraced the heel. They performed in towering platforms, pairing one of history's most feminine modern cliches with a hyper-masculine, rough rocker aesthetic. These artists were echoing Louis XIV, using the high heel to manipulate cultural ideas about rebellion and power. History shows that the high heel is not inherently male or female. It is a piece of technology and art that carries only the meaning we choose to give it. Since the rules of what men and women should wear are entirely fabricated, you have the power to ignore them. Tomorrow, try breaking just one of your own fashion rules. See how it changes the way you move through the world.